And I am alarmed that people are not ready to accept the truth and work to resolve them rather than sort of go on and on with life as it always is. Consume, 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 militarization, everything we do. And I must say, when I was growing up, I ran away from the Jewish community. I thought, oh my God, there are all these fuddy-duddy people who don't really quite fit in India. They don't really speak Hindi very well. People don't know that Regina Guha of 1914, she was a Jewish woman. Her mother was Jewish. Her father was a Bengali who converted to Judaism, was the first woman to challenge the legal system, saying women should be lawyers. But I'm proud of many Israelis who speak out, of Jews who speak out. And today yesterday, 100,000 Israelis demonstrating in the street, to stop the war, to have a ceasefire, and to bring the hostages back home, even though they know many of them may not be alive.
Hi, welcome to the Mohua Show. My name is Mohua Chinappa and I am an author, entrepreneur, and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से.
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Jael Silliman, who's a renowned author, scholar, and women's rights activist, and an extremely favorable person of mine who I'm very, very fond of. I'm exceptionally honored to have Jael today with me. She has a deep connection to a city that's really my favorite, Kolkata, and also New York City. She has an impressive academic background with degrees from Wellesley College, Harvard University, University of Texas, Austin, and Columbia University. Jael has held significant positions at the Jesse Smith Noyce Foundation and the Ford Foundation, focusing on gender and development, reproductive rights, environmental issues. She has written extensively about the Jewish community in Kolkata. In addition to her writing and activism, Jael is also a passionate painter. Her work reflects her feminist beliefs and her connection with nature. And I cannot be happier than anything today to have you on my show, Jael. Welcome to today's episode.
Mohua, that's so kind of you. That's a very extravagant introduction, but I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me on your show today.
So, Jael, let's start by telling us a little bit about your early life in Kolkata and how it influenced your journey.
Well, Mohua, I'm much older than you. I'm 69 years old. I'll be 69 this year. So I was born in 1955 in what was quite a very different Calcutta. I grew up in a very cosmopolitan Calcutta. I grew up in a Jewish family, but very well integrated into the communities around us, not just one community. I'm from the Jewish community, which was at that time when I was growing up already rapidly shrinking. There were about 700 of us Jews. There used to be 4,000 or 5,000 at its max in the 1940s. I went to a Catholic convent, and I was in a school called Loretto House. And my class reflected the dynamism and the cosmopolitanism of the city. We had Chinese girls, Armenian girls, Parsi girls, Jewish girls, Hindu girls, Muslim girls, Sikh girls, Italian, English, Czechoslovakian, Japanese, all in my class of 42. So I grew up in a very multicultural world, in a world where I accepted difference as the norm. It was nothing unusual to me. And we were each very aware of our own roots and our own heritage, but we're always reaching out and wanting to know about each other, about our communities, tasting each other's foods, going to each other's homes. That was the Calcutta that I grew up in and the Calcutta that I really love. And I think that element of warmth and sort of open-mindedness that I grew up in Calcutta still exists today, despite there being a shrinking in sort of the many communities, the people of the many communities that made Calcutta today. So I grew up in a very diverse Calcutta. I'm from a family of strong women. My mother was a teacher in my school. My grandmother was a teacher. My other granny was a teacher. I'm one of 5 children, 4 girls in my family. I went to an all-girls school. It was a Catholic convent, and we had these strong role models as women. So for me also, strong women were sort of everyday part of my life. And I did grow up thinking that we were equal in every way. I must admit that in terms of professionalism, we didn't know, or we knew few sort of professions that were open to women. So we thought of social workers, secretaries, teachers, some doctors, not that many lawyers. So in terms of professional sort of aspirations to women, I think they were much more limited in my time, but we didn't feel that women in any way were less than men. So I would say the Calcutta I grew up in was a multicultural city, and I grew up in a bourgeois Calcutta. I was very privileged. I came definitely from a upper middle class family. So I had all the benefits of Calcutta. Calcutta was still a very poor city then. I mean, there was a lot of poverty in the streets. There is still poverty, but not like the kind of poverty I grew up. So from a very young age, I was aware of that poverty. And in our school, because it was a convent school, we had nuns and priests who actually taught us the importance of giving back to society. And I was part of the leadership training service, and we would go and, work with poorer girls from other schools. That was also very much part of the ethic. And though my school was an upper class school, we also had girls, especially Christian girls from very poor backgrounds as well, who were given scholarships. So in the Calcutta I grew up, this sort of notion of everybody from poor and rich backgrounds being close to each other was also a norm. And we also had this strong ethic that we should give back. So I feel Calcutta shaped me in a very beautiful way and gave me the roots and the foundation that I could be myself anywhere in the world. So I'm always grateful to the city for that.
We both are from the same school of Loreto, and we share that common culture. Completely relate to you because during the years I grew up, we had the same culture of giving back, and that continues to stay on with me even today. So let's just talk a little bit about your work, Yael. I mean, it just spreads across from gender development, reproductive rights, environmental issues. What drives your passion for all these causes?
So I would say sort of my two main concerns would be women's rights. And I told you that came from a very deep-seated notion that I had a lot of privileges that other women didn't have. And I saw this even abroad, and especially in India. There were many women who didn't have the privileges, and I felt that I wanted women to have the privileges and the ability to live the kind of rich lives, not in terms of wealth, but lives where they could really meet their own aspirations, where they could be whatever they wanted to be, with their driving passions could be met, and they could contribute in all fields of society. That was a very bedrock principle for me. And I actually got a scholarship to a women's college, as you said, Wellesley College, and it was the 1970s, the birth of the feminist, second wave feminist movement. Feminism was very strong on campus, and it was also my first introduction to sexuality, lesbian and gay issues, which were unknown to me, having come from India. And I felt that was very important for all kinds of people, not just women, to be able to express themselves and their sexual identities in the way in which they wished. Environmental issues came to me much later. I basically, when I was growing up, poverty was a driving concern because I came from a country where there was a lot of poverty. I saw what was possible in America because when I went to the United States, I didn't see much poverty. Unfortunately, there's much more poverty in America today than I grew up with, saying in the 1970s. Environmental issues, I thought, it's a bourgeois issue. It's about organic food. It's about keeping the wilds and conservation for rich people to go and enjoy themselves. And I never really realized how important environmental issues were till I started working at the Noise Foundation in the 1980s and found out about environmental justice, about the right where people who live in environments, especially where there's too much pollution, chemical pollution, health issues that arise from it, tribal people in India, the Chipko movement. And I realized, no. If you talk about environment as purely about conservation, that may be an issue that affects few people and people who are fishers and hunters. But if we really talk about the environment where we live, work, and play, and everybody has a right to live and work and play in a healthy environment, then the people who are most impacted negatively by environmental damage are the poorest of the poor, because they're always driven, as you know, to the most marginal of lands, and they live in the most places where other people don't want to live. So that became a driving concern. And I also began to understand, was the first person actually to start a gender and environmental program in the Noise Foundation, which brought gender and environmental issues together. And I got to meet amazing people like Wangari Maathai and Bella Abzug and the people and take part in the first, women's environmental summits. And we realized also the critical role that women play, not only in terms of protecting the environment, regenerating the environment, and the role that they play as environmental keepers to keep our environment the way it is. So environmental issues came to me more academically. I had to learn about the issues. I didn't feel them right away as I did about gender issues. But right now, I've seen huge progress in terms of the women's movements around sexuality, and even the environmental movement. But I also see the greatest challenges we face today are environmental challenges. And I am alarmed that people are not ready to accept the truth and work to resolve them, rather than sort of go on and on with life as it always is. Consume, 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 militarization. Everything we do as a society is so toxic for the environment. And we pretend that nothing's happening. Yet we're boiling here. India's reached 52 degrees Fahrenheit. This is not going to be a livable planet. The oceans are getting warmer. Coral reefs are whitening. And it just alarms me that people just go on with their everyday business, ignoring the real shattering of the planet, that if we only stop and listened, we would change course. So I think environmental issues right now are the most important challenges that we face as a human race.
Absolutely, Ail. It's frightening when I just saw a footage, of a water truck tanker that is just going through one of these streets in Delhi, and women of all ages and boys and, people are just running, jostling for more space to just get one bucket of water. And it is like, you start thinking, where is the world really going to? And it is really, really scary. So let's just talk a little bit about.
So, Mohua, can I say one more thing about that?
Yes.
So I think we're seeing the tanks, and we're getting alarmed when we see the tanks because they're in middle class neighborhoods. But water has always been a scarcity for too many women around the world,
Yes.
especially poor women. I worked in Rajasthan for a year, and from the 1970s, there were deep water shortages where women would walk miles for water. And to carry that water on their heads, they didn't have plastic pots in those days, and in gamlas, they would made of pottery, ceramic, or what we call matti, or steel pots. That heavy load, they'd walk back in the hot sun to provide water for their families. So environmental issues for poor people, or what we see today, has been their lot for a long period of time, but we could afford to shut our eyes to it because it didn't affect us.
I agree with you, Yael. As long as it just doesn't enter your own living room, we are all very, very, we are not cognizant about it at all. And that's why we are where we are today. Yeah. So, Yael, you've written a lot about the Jewish community in Calcutta. What inspired you to delve into this topic?
So, Mohua, actually, I'm a funny Jew, okay? Because I'm culturally very Jewish, but I'm not religious at all. In fact, I believe in the oneness of all religions, and I pray in a temple, in a synagogue, in a church, anywhere where I move to pray, or just by myself alone in the house. So I don't believe, religion is that important in my life, but I'm culturally very Jewish. And I must say, when I was growing up, I ran away from the Jewish community. I thought, oh my God, there are all these fuddy-duddy people who don't really quite fit in India. They don't really speak Hindi very well. They were mostly elderly people. The younger people were already beginning to go away. And I didn't know that much. We had prayers in our house once a week on Sabbath, and we went to our synagogue on high holidays. But I wouldn't say I was grounded in my Jewish faith at all. So though I was culturally Jewish, I was not very Jewish religious wise. But when I came back to India in about 15 years ago, that's in 2009 when I came here to live, I realized there were not even 50 Jews left in the city. And I realized that not many people would even know about our community. It would be a memory. Yet it was not only the Jewish community, but Jews, Parsis, Armenian, Chinese, who made the city what it was. People now, there's a sort of video going viral about Sir David Sassoon and how he built Bombay. But Sir David Ezra and many Jews played a leading role in making Calcutta the city it was today. And not just Calcutta, Rangoon, Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, the small community of Baghdadi Jews. There were other Jews in India as well, but I'm talking about my community, the latest arrival in India. My ancestor was the first Jew to come to Calcutta in 1796 from Syria, and he was the founder of this community that spread across what I call Jewish Asia, from Karachi to Shanghai. And they played this phenomenal role. But they didn't only play an important mercantile role, which was, of course, very important, but they also played very important roles that people don't know. That Regina Guha of 1914, she was a Jewish woman. Her mother was Jewish. Her father was a Bengali who converted to Judaism, was the first woman to challenge the legal system, saying women should be lawyers. Okay, it was 1914. There were women who were teachers. The first Miss India from 1947 and her daughter 1967 were both two Jewish girls from Calcutta. One of the first Hindi film stars was Jewish in those days. She had her own Sun production company. There were men who were sort of pioneers in photography, in every field of endeavor. There were only 4,000 Jews in Calcutta, but they played an incredible role. And they also played an incredible philanthropic role. And I'm always interested in philanthropy and doing good for society. They built schools and hospitals and educational institutions and charities. And I felt that whilst the sort of male history, the mercantile history was documented, it was this broader cultural history where ordinary men and women from our community played decisive roles in the shaping of society had not yet been told. And I felt, look, I'm trained. I do have access to people in our community around the world. I'm still in a position where I can gather together those memories and present them in a more comprehensive way, not just to Calcutta, not just to India, but to the world. And so I started writing about my community, but always conscious of the fact that we are just one of many of the wonderful communities that lived in Calcutta. And in India today, where there's a strident Hinduism, where it's like, Hindus invented everything, whether it was plastic surgery hundreds of years ago and sort of this notion that everything was done by Hindus. No, it was people of all communities who made this culture as rich and vibrant as it is. And so I wanted this story, especially in today's sort of world, to be heard and to realize that communities and countries thrive when people work together.
Let's just talk a little about your latest book, Yael. Shalome Rides, a Royal Elephant. What a lovely title. The story of the first Jews in Kolkata. It's quite unique. Could you tell us a little bit more about the process of conceptualizing and curating this story?
Okay, so Shalom Rides, a Royal Elephant was my first children's book. It's not only for children. I think adults will enjoy it too. But there's a well-known artist. Her name is Siona Benjamin from New York. She's a Bene Israel artist. She does wonderful work where she mixes Indian and Jewish motifs and uses miniature styles and pop art. And she's really quite well known. And she called me and said she had done a book on the Bene Israeli community, the Jews of Bombay, which is thousands of years old, a Marathi community. And she said, would you like to work with me and we'll do a book on the Calcutta Jews? And she would illustrate it and I would write it. Well, that didn't work out because she's a very well-known artist and we couldn't kind of get the funding for her to do the kind of illustrations we had hoped for the book. And my first idea was, I've never written a children's book, but I've never done so many things and I've tried them and they've worked out. Why don't I try and what could I write about? And my other books, one is a nonfiction about the women in my family who shaped, Jewish life in Calcutta. And then two books, which are novels set in Calcutta about the Jewish community. So I said, I haven't talked about the early history of the community. And my brother was in the process of actually translating my ancestor's diary. He's my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather who came to India, the first Baghdadi Jew from Syria in 1796. And he has a diary that runs from 1794 to 1836. And it's quite a colorful diary. And, for example, he was the Wazir to the Nawab of Awadh. He was a court jeweler. He actually went to weigh the Kohinoor diamond for Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So he's a very splendid character. But he was also somebody who cares about philanthropy, about Jewish religion, and set the roots of the community, which spread from here across Jewish Asia. And I said, why don't I write a story from his diary and take the most colorful elements and talk about them and write about them. And I thought, well, how do you write a children's story? And I thought, maybe I'll have the narrator as a monkey. And the monkey can then talk about his many exploits, and that would engage children. And I found it to be very fun piece to write, and I'm really happy because it's actually doing very well in terms of marketing as well. So this is another way I try to reach people through fiction, through non-fiction articles and books, scholarly articles as well, so that people know about the community from wherever they're located. They can actually engage and know part of India, which they may have not known before. And so that's the story of how Shalome Rides, the Royal Elephant came together.
You've also written Man with Many Hats and The Teak Almira. So, what are those two books all about?
So The Man with Many Hats is a story about a very eccentric Jewish man who was born about in the 1920s. So at a time when the Jewish community was very strong and very vibrant. And the story is about Jewish community life in those days through this very eccentric character who was a maverick in every way, and about his family. And it tells about Jewish culture through his life, which is also a very interesting life, and through the family that, that he has. And it ends in the 1980s when there's hardly any Jews left. And he's one of those singular figures in Calcutta. It's loosely based on somebody I know. And so it's a very colorful story. It's a very funny story. It's a poignant story. After I wrote that, the Teak Almira is very different. I'd moved back to Calcutta for several years, and I noticed so many people from London, from Australia, from Canada, Jews who had left Calcutta but never left Calcutta because their hearts were in Calcutta, who had come back looking for home. And they would always go to the same places. They would go to the cemetery to put stones on the graves of their ancestors. They would go to the synagogue because the synagogue is what they would remember. They would go back to the Jewish girls' school or the boys' school where they studied. And they would go back to their home, wherever their homes were, their addresses. And they'd try to remember and reconjure what life was like in Calcutta. So I have three characters. One, an old man who left in the 1940s, who came back to Calcutta and hated it because he wanted to remember Calcutta and see Calcutta as it was in the 1940s. And so when he goes out and sees a very different Calcutta from where he grew up, he's almost always in tears and locks himself in his hotel and says he won't go out because he wants to keep those memories as they were and alive. So it's a very sad story because he's a man who's crushed because of what happens. And then you have a girl, a young woman, she's a lesbian. She comes back to Calcutta and she's open-minded. She's only heard stories about Calcutta. She goes to all the places, but she sees so much more Calcutta. And she finds Calcutta was even much more exciting a place than she had ever heard it was. And she revels in it. And then you have a woman who's lived in Calcutta all her life, who negotiates through these different characters to see the city as it really is. So it's a story about identity, about memory, and how we relate to both the past and the future. So that's the story of the Teak Almira. And the Teak Almira has also a mystery in it because I'm not going to give you the story. There's a letter that's found in the Teak Almira that unravels one of the sort of mysteries in the novel. So
Wonderful, wonderful, Yael. So, Yael, apart from being a writer, activist, you're also a painter. So, how does painting complement your other pursuits and what does it mean to you personally?
Mohua, life is always a series of accidents. At least it was accidents for me. I grew up loving to paint. I had a wonderful art teacher, Mrs. Gupta, in school, and she really taught us how to draw. And she was a lot of Indian design. She was Shanti Naketan, and I loved studying with her. And when I went abroad, I was going to study art at Wellesley College, which has a very good art history and art program. When I got there in my first semester, I was not able to get into an art class. The class was already full. For some reason, I didn't enroll in time. I was new to the whole system. And one of my advisors said, why don't you try this class? There's a gentleman from Chile. He is, one of the people running away from the dictatorship over there. He's part of the revolutionary movement. He is getting refuge over here, political refuge as a refugee in our college, and he'll be here for a semester. Why don't you take a chance and take a course with him? His name was Manfred Maxneef. And I went to his class and he blew me away. He was this romantic revolutionary who told us about the many revolutions that were going on in Latin America that he was part of. And he just blew my mind. And I became a political science major, and I never became an art major. And I always wondered, I said, how did this guy, I've never seen him again, Manfred Max Neef, walk into my life for one semester and change fundamentally who I was and make me passionate about revolutionary justice and social movements and everything else. And then I was working at the Noise Foundation. This was in the 1990s, and we had programs in Chile, and I was in Chile. And it was so bizarre. Everywhere I looked, my first time in Chile, there were 6 feet posters of him everywhere. He was running for president of Chile. He was the alternate Nobel Peace Prize winner. He was a human rights and environmental activist. I said, wow, the whole of Chile is mad about this man. Of course, he would change my life at the age of 16. And so from being wanting to be art major, I never took an art course. I became a political science major, and that's how I got involved really in sort of political activism and social justice movements. Because if you remember the 70s and 80s, those were days of great hope. There was so many movements for justice around the world, and we were expanding notions of rights, and there was sort of civil rights movements were in fruition, and so many good things were happening in the world. And we just thought our rights were getting larger and larger. So I was part of those movements, sexual rights movements, women's rights to have control over their own body, environmental justice movements of the 90s. So those were issues that really shaped me. And when I came back to India about 14 years ago to live most of the time, which is what I'm here now, I sort of had an urge that I wanted to paint again. I was like, I don't think I can paint, but somehow I just wanted to paint. And I started painting. And in the last 6 years, I've done about 400 paintings. So I've sold about 250 of them. I just started putting them on Facebook, and people wanted to buy them, which was a big surprise. In fact, I'm having an exhibition right now and really happy with the response because my work is very simple, but I think it comes from my passionate commitment to gender issues and environmental issues, where I try to reimagine in my work subconsciously what a world would be like where women were free, where women and nature come together. And in my work, women can be dancing trees, they can have birds flying over them. Their bodies can be, got animals on them. I don't know where that imagination comes from, but it had been really wonderful for me. The sad thing, Mohua, is since October 7th and the war in Gaza, I've not been able to paint. I've been so saddened. My spirit has been broken. So I'm now really, really pushing myself to try painting again because I realize that I've got to get over the sadness that has engulfed me for these last 6 or 8 months. And maybe my painting will help. And many of my friends have told me, your paintings give us a sense of joy and hope. Please paint again. And I feel I need that as well. So I think my painting is definitely a product of all the experiences that have shaped my life that were lying dormant and have somehow found a voice. So I hope I can find that voice again.
Yael, as a Jew who's outside Israel right now, and this could be a little bit of a political question, but how do you feel, with this entire mayhem that's just going on? I mean,
I don't
it's
want to talk too much about it because I feel, unfortunately, this is a very, very polarized topic. People have one view or the other. And I'm deeply saddened by what's happened because I'm so saddened by the loss of lives. How many people are dying in Gaza, so many women and children. And I'm deeply saddened about what's happening in Israel and the right-wing government that is there now. And also I know that a lot of people in Israel are in trauma too. I hear my family and my sisters talk about the bombs that are still continuing to be dropped on them and the trauma they're facing. I'm not saying their trauma is greater than the trauma in Gaza, but I'm just saying there's trauma all around. And I don't see a resolution because I feel they're fundamentalists on both sides who make peace so difficult. But I'm proud of many Israelis who speak out, of Jews who speak out. And today yesterday, 100,000 Israelis demonstrating in the street, to stop the war, to have a ceasefire, and to bring the hostages back home, even though they know many of them may not be alive. So I feel as if the situation of the world today, where there's very authoritarian, fundamentalist regimes that are anti-people around the world, wherever we look, makes me really wonder where we're going and bringing it back to the environment. Our greatest challenge right now as a species is to save our planet and to keep something for future generations. And instead, we're making war with one each other. And we know that war and the military industrial complex is the worst thing for the environment. Those chemicals, every aspect of making a weapon, from the manufacture to its deployment, has such terrible environmental effects. Human effects are terrible too. But the long-term environmental damage at a time when we should be making that our one priority where the world should come together and say, enough, this is where we need to work and we need to do this together. Right? All countries, Israel, India, US, all of us working hand in hand. And that's what alarms me even more, that we can continue these stupid wars where no people benefit except arms manufacturers and corrupt politicians, and everybody suffers. So I would put Gaza in that context of a larger planetary problem. And I go to bed every night praying for peace and for some sanity to emerge again.
We also share a common love for an artist, Frida Kahlo.
Yes.
How has she influenced your work? And tell us a little bit about why Frida Kahlo is special to you. She's very special to me too. Let's hear it from you, Yael.
I'm very lucky because when I was at the Ford Foundation, we had a Mexico City office, and I have been about 12 times to Mexico. So I first got introduced to Frida probably 35 or 40 years ago, when she was not that well known as she is today. I must say, when I saw her paintings, I really didn't like her paintings very much. They didn't grab me. I don't think she's a great artist, but I loved her spirit. I loved who she was. I loved her ability to be herself, no matter where she was, dressed as a Mexican peasant or as a man. She felt equally comfortable. She was a woman ahead of her times. She actually championed the causes of indigenous people. She championed their art. She was a socialist. She was she thought about issues of sexuality and sort of bisexuality and gayness way before their time. She was the one who proposed to Diego Rivera. She actually did whatever she wanted. She had an affair with Trotsky. She did whatever she wanted at a time in the 1930s and 40s when Mexico was a conservative society. And so I felt that, wow, this woman really had such a fighting spirit. And with all that pain that she went through, with those numerous surgeries, she just battled on. She battled on through the pain, and she lived life to its full. She was a woman also who was always vulnerable, both in terms of her physical vulnerabilities, her health, but she was also emotionally vulnerable because she had a horrible time with Diego Rivera.
Yes.
Who was the passion and love of her life. In fact, I went to Diego's house too, and what I did learn in Mexico is Diego is truly one of the best artists of the world. I don't like him, but his art is phenomenal. And the murals that he's created, I would encourage everybody to look at his work, because I think he is Mexican and was not known as well as he should have been. But I didn't like him as a person, because he actually, in his home, which I visited, I saw a picture of him next to Frida Kahlo while she was dying. She was all dressed up in her deathbed with ribbons in her hair, lots of embroidery, wearing some indigenous clothes. I'm not sure from which community they came from. And he said, I can't help destroy everything I love. And it made me so sad that this man again, helped to destroy her, even though he loved her so greatly. But Frida was willing to talk about her pain, to paint her pain, to draw her pain, and not keep it away. Everything that was broken in her, she exposed to the world. This was a time when nobody did that. And these were the things that made Frida, for me, an inspiration, a person who I've always admired and loved. My home is full of Frida stuff, but it's not her paintings that really grip me. It's her zest for life, her honesty, her truthfulness, and her ability to be exactly who she was without pretense.
Yael, you are also inspirational in so many multiple ways. Yes, you are, right? You've been single since 2003 and you've also said that you really enjoy living life on your own terms. What exactly do you mean by this? I mean, it'll be lovely for us to have this conversation. What do you think was restrictive before this and you could not live on your own terms?
I was married for 23 years. I was married to a Bengali, actually. We married and met when we were in university and in college. And my ex-husband was an astrophysicist, very much, into his own world of physics and stars. And his jobs were limited. Wherever there was one position, we would have to move there. And even though I was a feminist, I moved with him because I'm a sort of a person who can do multiple jobs, wear multiple hats. And so I felt I was always accommodating his life, his lifestyle. I was a mother. I was an immigrant in the United States. I was learning the system. I was trying to make my own way through that system. Financially, things were also tough, but I was always accommodating my husband, my family, his family, etc. And I thought I was happy in my marriage. I didn't know there was a problem till I found he was having an affair with somebody else and he wanted a divorce. And at that time, it was a very shattering experience for me. I felt truly betrayed and deeply, deeply hurt. But I just become a tenured professor in the United States at the time, barely 6 months into tenure. I had just written, the books I needed for tenure, the articles. And I found myself having to support my family and my girls. And that's a long story. And I applied for the job I wanted. And it was in New York. I was living in Iowa City. And it was the job at the Ford Foundation as a program officer in their women's rights unit and reproductive rights unit. And I was able to take the job I wanted. And I was able to stand on my own 2 feet. And after the year, I felt that heavy burden of marriage, which I carried unconsciously. I didn't even know I was carrying it. I suddenly felt, wow, I can fly. I can do whatever I want to do. Also met somebody who, I had a wonderful relationship with. We're still very close friends, but sort of understood my own sexuality. I got so much more confidence in being able to live life on my own terms. That means be who I was, travel where I wanted to, do what I needed to do, support my family, and then decide at the age of 54, my kids have grown up. Now I want to come back to Calcutta and I want to re-root myself in a place I've always loved and missed, which I could never have done. And so I moved back to Calcutta. And though I had been away 30 years, it felt like I'd never left. And I was able to live again life on my own terms and really find my roots and myself in Calcutta, making sort of a base with old friends, but finding so many new friends and also learning so much more about the heritage of this rich city, not just the Jewish community heritage. I've written books about Calcutta's heritage much more broadly. And so I found myself. And so I think there's, there are good things in being married, but I feel being single now, I've been single almost the same time I was married. These have been my best years.
Yeah, and I agree with you all with everything that you're saying. I'm still to close in on all of those things, but yeah.
Takes time, but you'll get there.
Yeah. It's a little difficult when you've been in a covert narcissist relationship. It's quite difficult, but yeah, I'll get there. Finally, what advice would you give to young women who aspire to make a difference in the world, just like you have, Yael?
I'm not somebody to give advice because everybody's circumstances are so different, but I would say what worked for me. And I would say the 3 or 4 things that are most important is when you get an opportunity, take it. Okay. Run with it and make the most of it because opportunities come, but they also go. And something that comes today may not come tomorrow. So don't always self-doubt yourself. If somebody and women tend to do that, gives you an opportunity, run with it and make the most of it. Second thing I think that's really important is to have discipline. It means sticking with something for a long period of time. I'm retired for the last 20 years, 15 years almost, but I work 6 to 8 hours a day. That means getting up in the morning, if it's painting, working at the painting, knowing that each time you can make it better. If it's writing, doing that article, you're a writer, Mohua. You know how many times you edit and rewrite and stay with a piece till you feel ready for it to be sent out into the world. So I'd say discipline is really important. And I think a passion, you've got to love what you do. And that means love doesn't come in anything easily. Love comes with work. Love comes with building that relationship to your work, with building yourself also, and then you can love what you do. But if it's not very high quality, you're not going to love what you do. So it's having that love for yourself and for your work and doing what really makes you happy. And I think for women, I think it's not doubting ourselves all the time. These are the things I think would be most important. And I think each and every one of us have so many hidden talents that we've not even explored. And to actually taking the time to find your own voice and giving it a chance to really ring out and sing.
Oh my God, that was beautiful, Yael. You spoke to my heart, and thank you so much for being on today's episode. It's been an absolute honor. It's been an honor knowing you, having you for my debut book launch. And till date, I remain absolutely in awe of you and your journey. Thank you, Yael.
Thank you so much, Mohua, for having me on your show.
Thank you.
To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk ईमानदारी से.